This episode is sponsored by Afrezza and Mannkind Corp as part of our ongoing 2022 collaboration. Mannkind has paid Diabetics Doing Things for this placement, but the thoughts and opinions of hosts and guests are original and unfiltered. For more information about Afrezza and Mannkind, please visit afrezza.com. That's AFREZZA.com. Please see additional important safety information, full prescribing information, including boxed warning, medication guide, and instructions for use on afrezza.com/safety. Welcome back to another episode of Diabetics Doing Things. We are telling the amazing stories of people with diabetes from all over the world. My very special guest today, Mr. Eric Tozer, a person with diabetes who has been all over the world and doing things in big ways. We're here at ADCES 2022 in Baltimore. Eric, man, it's good to see you.
It's great to see you as well. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on the podcast. I've heard so many of them over the years, and known you for so many years. So it's nice to finally be here, and at this conference too. It's always fun to see kind of what's tip of the spear and what's happening in the industry.
It's great, and I think also getting to interact with so many like CDCESs and HCPs. That's a big part of what we're doing, and this is in our partnership with Afrezza and Mannkind. So thank you, Afrezza and Mannkind, for your support on this and for making this happen.
Yeah, certainly. What a great company. I know we both use it, so I'll probably dive into that. But on the conference note, I think it's inspiring and encouraging as a type 1 to see just the countless CDCs, dietitians, endos, right, at all these various conferences to see what they're doing kind of behind the scenes. That as a patient, not a lot of patients here, right, and kind of to see what the industry does, it's inspiring and encouraging and exciting because there's so much happening. So it's really fun.
Yeah, I've been to a number of these over the years, as I know you have, and I think for many patients, they probably wonder what happens, or maybe even don't even realize that these meetings are happening. So, like, if you were going to give somebody a behind-the-scenes look at what's happening at these conferences, like, what would you say?
Yeah, I've been to and spoken at so many JDRF conferences or ADA one, like the big kind of patient-centered one. But these, it's fun to see the kind of the next generation, the young docs, the young CDEs that are so hungry, and the ones that have been in the space for a long time, right? And to see kind of they're continuing to learn and continuing to stop by all the booths and see, hey, what's going on here? What's going on there? You guys just released this, you released that. So it's really fun to see that, there's this army of people that we know as our diabetes team, right? Kind of your endos, your dietitians, et cetera. And they're continuously learning. And as I think we kind of, because we don't see that all the time, we see them every 3 months or whatever it is, and you kind of get that engagement. But it's exciting to see. And from just a product perspective, I mean, I know the listener can't see us, but we're surrounded by every brand.
We're actually on the event floor right now, right in the middle in the Mannkind booth. And it's interesting for me because when you're diagnosed, we're going to talk a lot about diagnosis in your story here soon, but they talk about the technology that's coming, and they talk about the research that's coming, and you actually get to experience that here. And I think from a patient, like you said, there aren't that many patients here. So for us to be able to get behind the scenes and look at some of these posters and look at some of this technology, it really is encouraging that people who are diagnosed with diabetes today and in the future, they don't have to go through some of the hurdles that we had, close to 20 years ago.
Yeah. Certainly happy to be a guinea pig and help however we can. But it's somewhat selfishly, it's fun to see, right? From my own education, I feel like I come away from these things having learned something new, or a new technique, or a new something that's coming out. And so it's always fun to get out in the community in whatever aspect we can.
Yeah. And I think, you mentioned we've run into each other at conferences before, and we were at a JDRF event at the end of 2019, and you were kind of on your press tour, so to speak, after the World Marathon Challenge, which I want to get into. But just to let you know, we went on a run that morning.
Yes,
and that's one of my big peak diabetes celebrity access moments. I was like, I got to go on a run with Eric Tozer in the same year, on the World Marathon Challenge tour. And I just want to thank you for that. That was really cool. Just what a great time.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. That was a fun run. I mean, it was in Seattle. We went along the boardwalk there, and what a special view too. I mean, gosh, it was, I probably won't be in that good a shape ever again in my life, but to say you got me at my peak, but.
Well, that's good. That means there's some for the rest of us out there at least. Because I remember walking back, I was like, the amount of days where I've woken up before 6 a.m. to run 5 miles is pretty few and far between. So glad that we got to share that.
And a fun way about sports too, right? I love sports. I grew up playing every sport, played soccer in college, but it can unify people, bring people together. And obviously this is one-on-one, but like on a global scale, we've seen it, right? You look at something like the World Cup or the Olympics, right? But sports it's such a fun way. I think we can learn so much and engage with each other. And in the type 1 space, you can see how it can bring people together and kind of accomplish something together and goal setting, all that kind of stuff. But yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. This podcast is going to cover more than sports, but if we could, I'm sure, go for hours just talking about the benefits of competition. And, for me, it taught me early how to fail and how to also pick yourself up and move forward. And that was a big part of early days with diabetes. I think I was better suited for that adversity because of my experience as an athlete. And
100%.
And it was also sort of the key, like diabetes management was my key to what I wanted, which was to be able to play sports at a high level. So yeah, I'm a big believer in the power of sports and the work that you guys do at Diabetes Sports Project. We might get into that a little bit today, but it's really inspiring for people like me and also for people who are younger coming up who want to pursue their dreams as athletes or even just be weekend warriors or whatever the case may be. It's inspiring.
Yeah, and I think that we and we'll dive into the actual questions, but I think that we, when I was diagnosed in 2006, I didn't know anybody. I was coming off of a college soccer career. I didn't know what it meant, what it didn't mean. I hardly knew type 1 from type 2. And so I think what's nice is that we have people like you, people like me. I mean, there's countless others, right? Fiona on the paddleboard and Seb climbing and running across things.
Where's Seb right now? Probably running across a continent somewhere.
I think hopefully he's taking a well-deserved break. And, Mark Andrews in the NFL and Jordan Morrison. I mean, we've got so many examples across sports and arts and music and movies. And so I hope and I think that the conversation is shifting to no longer the question being, can I do this with type 1? But how do I do this with type 1?
100%.
And that one word shift is so powerful. And hopefully that's, a takeaway from things like this, what you've been doing with this podcast and everything on social. And so it's fun to see. And I think people being diagnosed today are hopefully feeling a little bit better off than, I was 16 years ago. When you were 16. So,
yeah. So let's talk about it. Like 16 years ago, 2006, you were 22 years old coming off of a college soccer career. Talk to us about those early days in that diagnosis. What was that like?
Yeah, it was, I laugh about it now because I truly didn't know up from down. It was like I said, I didn't really know anybody with type 1. I lost 20 pounds while traveling abroad. So I was over in Europe. Thankfully it didn't get much worse over there. And truly I was completely naive to it. You're in a different setting. I didn't really
walking around a lot, different routine.
Jokingly, I thought it was the beers and croissants, but it was there was something seriously wrong, but I had no idea. And, landed back in America. And it was actually my mom who said on the spot at the airport, she says, because she hadn't seen me for about a month. And she's like, saw this drastic 20-pound weight loss. She's like, I think you have type 1. And again, no family history, but just kind of, she had ran a preschool for a long time. And so she, kind of was in tune with it and a quick checkup. A1C was in the 12s. My blood sugar at the time, and it was fasting, was in the 500s.
Wow.
And the next week I was set to move across the country in a 1-bedroom apartment. I kind of did everything you shouldn't have done. Thankfully, good doctor team and just, I think I go back to being an athlete in that competitor mindset, kind of learning and understanding how to win, how to lose, how to learn from both of those, not giving up, all that kind of, teamwork, you name it. But that certainly got me through those early years because there was some scary moments looking back on it now and knowing what I do know now compared to then was almost comical, but not comical because, like you, we know people who have had, terrible things happen, but
it kind of is always in the back of our minds, right? Like this is a disability, a debilitating disease that can really quickly go from stable to in a really bad situation for a number of reasons. And so it is scary to move across the country and be in a 1-bedroom apartment a few weeks into diabetes and like sort of don't know what you don't know at that point.
Yeah, certainly. And, I fast forward 18 months still, learning. And I played a bunch of basketball games after work. We were doing this basketball league thing with work and didn't understand the impact of exercise on blood sugar yet. And I was trying to get onto a CGM, but it wasn't being approved. Ended up checking my blood sugar before bed. It was fine. It was good. It was like 120-ish and ended up, it was going down, but I didn't have that concept of blood sugar trends and effects of insulin.
Well, and at that point, like no CGM as well. So it's like you don't have that view and be able to look at that chart.
Yes, exactly. And my wife ends up, 2 a.m. or something to me having a seizure from a low blood sugar, right? And so it's certainly a scary moment for her. I obviously didn't know what was going on, but I was approved for a CGM about a week later.
There it is.
Thankfully, knock on wood, haven't had anything that serious since. But it was just a reminder, right? We can have access to the docs and the tech, but sometimes it's that conversational stuff too that helps, of like, because maybe clearly I didn't hear that from my endo at the time, and so sometimes that's where community, I feel like, can be so powerful, and I've spent since then trying to help other people, coach other people, probably a few a week for, call it, 15 years, to try to use my experiences, my highs and lows, if you will, to help others, and I see that more and more, which is super positive.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think as somebody externally looking at you and all of your accomplishments, co-founder of Diabetes Sports Project, ultramarathoner, World Marathon Challenge, father, college athlete, like, it's easy to say, oh, well, this guy's for sure got it all figured out. And so to hear you say, hey, making a friend with diabetes, getting involved with the community really helped you, and now you're giving back to other people. Something I often say is, like, the quickest way to learn anything about diabetes is make a friend with diabetes. And fortunately, social media, for all its negatives, in society, a lot of the positives are we can reach out and meet people that we otherwise wouldn't come in contact with. And I've seen that benefit. And, we're here at these poster sessions seeing the benefits of connection with people in social media, connecting with a friend with diabetes, and learning about products that way. It's really impactful. So, when you look back on kind of like your accomplishments as a person with diabetes in the time since you were diagnosed, like, what kind of stands out to you as your favorites, or like the things that you're most proud of?
Yeah, it's been a amazing 16 years. And somebody asked me a while back, would I take the diagnosis back if I could? I think anyone who said no to that would lie, right? But what I've learned about myself, what I've accomplished, I think because of type 1, right? I wouldn't have done the World Marathon Challenge. I mean, who knows, right? But I did it because of diabetes, and the relationships I formed, and how it's impacted and taught me things about, in my professional career, or at home as a parent, as a dad, as a father, as a husband. It's taught me so much, and I've learned so much and grown so much because of it. So, but, from the kind of accomplishment standpoint, the World Marathon Challenge, it's certainly something that I never thought I would have done. Ironically, somebody had emailed me about it the first year that the race took place, and he said, you should do this. And I laughed at him.
Wow. Planted that seed early.
Yeah, huh? Planted the seed. And the irony is that the article was written about a guy, Mike Wardian, who had done the race, and he's one of the best runners in the world. And fast forward 2 years later, I was trying to find something that hadn't been done by somebody with type 1, and that would, wouldn't be too much time away from family and work and all that kind of stuff. And it fit the bill. And so to do 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 consecutive days was.
And I know you've talked about it at length on other podcasts and other presentations. Like, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's still, you just said it. 7 marathons, 7 continents, 7 consecutive days. You're like finishing a marathon, literally jumping on a plane and flying somewhere immediately after, getting off the plane and immediately running a marathon. What's going through your mind as part of that? Like, obviously you prepared, and you can prepare as much as possible, but like when you're in it, what was that like?
Yeah, that's a great point, right? I trained as much as I could physically. I knew my legs, lungs, heart has to be strong to run 184 miles or something over the course of a week, and to be able to recover at 30,000 feet on an airplane. I mean, all those things, and not to mention the type 1 component on top of it all. But I tie so much. I kind of. To me, there's a lot of correlations between type 1 and sports, and this one kind of specifically, right? Because there's no end game for type 1. We have our every 3-month checkups. We have, goals we want to hit personally, and for me, I kind of looked at this 10-month journey, 8 months of training as, I'm not going to wait until the 7th marathon in Miami to have a win, if you will. Just like with type 1, I don't want to wait until my 3-month checkup to get that A1C checkup, to get that A1C result to see if that's a win or not. There's countless opportunities along the way. So if I did a bunch of hill repeats and I did it successfully, or the first time I hit 20 miles in training, or the first time I hit 25 miles in training, like, I celebrated the heck out of those, because one, why not? It's, for me, it was a great win.
Right.
Gives me the encouragement to keep going, and kind of keeps us motivated. And same with type 1. if I wake up in range, if I have a good post-meal blood sugar, if I get through a run or a workout and my sugars are steady, you better believe I'm celebrating all of those, even 16 years later, right? Because it's not easy to do, and I think sometimes we lose sight of that as type 1s because we do it 24 hours a day. Those little victories along the way help me, training for the race, and then also within the race itself, there was little opportunities along the way to have kind of that whether it was in Dubai or in Perth or throwing up in Chile during the race and getting through it. Like, I celebrate each of those little victories to kind of keep the motivation, keep the steam going, and get to the end.
I'm glad you said that because I think celebrating small wins is such a huge part of living a life well with diabetes, because like you said, it's not going away. It's a long journey. We've got a long way to go. Both of us still, we're, just short of 2 decades in for both of us. We've got a long way to go. It's not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. And we've got to stay present with that. And I remember a few years ago, one of my first JDRF conferences I spoke at, a family came up to me afterwards and they said, our son, we're here because of our son. He wasn't interested in coming, but we're here to try to learn more what we can do to help him. And I said, well, what's going on? And they said, well, 2 days out of the past 2 weeks, an ambulance has had to come to our house in the morning because he was in, DKA or was having a seizure. And, I said, hey, what did you do on the days that the ambulance didn't come? Did you celebrate the ambulance not coming? Because that's a big win in this case. Mm-hmm. And, for them in that moment, obviously there are things that they, could do to help prevent that and work on. But it kind of just a light bulb moment came on for them. They're like, this is going to happen. And it's okay, like, to get it wrong every now and then. Yeah. But it's what you do after. And it's those days where that doesn't happen, or you do wake up in range and you say, okay, cool. I have all the things that I've done up to this point have gotten me here. Let's not forget about all that work that goes into it. And I think that's sort of the cliche is it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you obviously understand marathons like more intimately than many of us. Sure. So like the longevity of a life with diabetes, like what parallels do you find like in a race, a long, 26.2 miles or training for a race? What parallels do you find with like running an ultramarathon or a marathon and living with diabetes?
Yeah, I think there's the obvious physical, right? There's the physical element, preparation, mental preparation, emotional preparation for kind of everything you can expect and trying to prepare for the you can expect. With type 1, my little Viore bag's got, my Afrezza in it. It's got my driver's license, my keys, my sugar, my backup sugar, kind of having it, those simple things, right? But having that plan in place, following, and then learning from the kind of wins and losses. I don't really like the word failure because I think, wasn't it Jordan that said I never fail, I either win or I learn, right? Mm-hmm. And that I think is so true in type 1, in sports and life, really. I try to apply that, and I try to teach that to our 6 and 9-year-old girls. We can always be learning, and I think that's, if you're not learning, then complacency is a word that our soccer coach in college used, and it was like the worst word in the world, right? Yeah. You just don't be complacent because for so many reasons. But I've tried to apply that my best I can to type 1 management and always be learning, and that's why I kind of made the diabetes management choices I have, and tried to continue to evolve as technology gets better, as as we grow as an industry to always just improving. And I think people probably, same with you, right? People look at me and maybe assume like, oh, he's perfect at type 1. Way far from it, right? I mean, I just talked through the seizure, but every day there's issues. Not every day. Some days there are, some days there aren't, more than others. But yeah, that kind of having a plan. I think also being, and this is something I've struggled with, but being vulnerable to accept help, to accept guidance, coaching. Well, I'm never against accepting coaching, but it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to have a bad day with type 1. And that's where I think community, for me at least, plays like a huge role, right? Even just a phone call or a text to a friend, a fellow type 1. There's things that you and I can relate to that even my wife and I, or my parents and I, right? We can't. There's just different wavelengths, and I think that's a really powerful part of community that I know I certainly lean on.
Well, yeah, I mean, you get to skip all the exposition. You don't have to explain why you're carrying the little bag with all of your stuff in it. You know, as my bag with my stuff in it sits right over next to yours, right? So we understand, like, oh, on the go, all those things have to go into it. And, you know, like being a competitor, I think sometimes I have to soften my edges a little bit and be a little nicer to myself too,
Yeah.
Because like you said, I kind of feel like a factory sometimes. It's like, it's been 0 days since the last diabetes incident. You know, it's like you're always, you try to get that number as high as you can, but you know you're going to wipe it away at some point.
And it's okay.
It is.
Right? And like, that's the thing. Like, people get so frustrated, and I think we just stop and like give ourselves a pat on the back and be like, hey, you're doing a good job because you're here. You're alive. You're here. You're trying, especially at conferences like this, right? Or at a JDRF event, or, you know, people that reach out. I'm like, hey, you're already a step ahead because you're trying and you want to get better. And that's, I think, the hardest, because you can't teach that. You can't make somebody want to get better. We can help them, and I know you do. And right, so I think that's just that encouragement. I hope people are continuing to be,
and to normalize it too.
Yeah.
You mentioned like being at a JRF event. I think one time I ran into you in maybe Denver, and you were about to go up and speak. You're like, God, my blood sugar's been high. Like, this is like, I just hate. I have to go up there and give this talk. And if that happened to me, like not shortly after, I was up on stage and I had to ask somebody to throw me a juice box. And a woman and her daughter came up to me afterwards and they said, it was so nice to see you in peril, you know, and just handle it and bounce back and like fix your low blood sugar in front of everybody, to know that like, yeah, we're up here, we're on this podcast, we're at this conference, but we also will have low blood sugars. We'll have high blood sugars. We'll, you know, forget to refill a prescription on time and have to figure it out on the fly. And so, yeah, you have to give yourself a little grace to just be a person.
Yeah. So true.
But also, like, you're like me in a lot of ways. You have a lot of irons in the fire. You know, you're a husband, a father, a businessman. You volunteer and you work with people with diabetes. You're traveling and speaking, and you live with diabetes. Like, you have a ton of irons in the fire. Like, how do you find balance? What do you do that allows you to, you know, do all of these extra things?
I know it's maybe not an expected answer, but my two kids, really, Harper and Charlotte, they're 6 and 9 as of this recording, and that's truly kind of why I do everything, is for them, to set an example for them and the community as a whole, right? Obviously they're kind of my priority and my number one, along with Jenna, wife. But the kind of discipline, preparation, I mean, I kind of can't turn it off, I guess. So I'm always doing something like you, right? And I think that there's that drive to just be the best version of myself. I don't see a world, to me, why not? Like if we're gonna do something, do it well.
Absolutely.
I don't work that way. I'm not gonna half-ass anything, because if you do, and you know, you get to the end of it and it didn't go the way you wanted, I wouldn't want to second guess myself and go, well, what if I actually tried 100%? So whatever I do, I tried to give it my all, and that's why, you know, for 15 years now, I've helped coach people and never taken a penny for it. If my story can help somebody, great. If my successes or failures, that's why I started Diabetes Sports Project, right? It's to say, you know, now we've got 150 athletes plus around the world, and fully volunteer based. We don't, you know, have any kind of financial backing from any of the big companies, which is good and bad, right? We are limited in how much we can do. But if those 150 collective stories can help answer somebody's questions, or somebody newly diagnosed can go on there and see, you know, a basketball player, a golfer, a yoga instructor, whatever it is, and have that relatability of like, I'm not alone, that person's like me. And they might not care about 7 marathons, but they might care about stand-up paddleboarding or whatever the sport is, or tennis, right? And they might see Maddie, and to have that, I'm not alone, there's somebody like me, looks like me, acts like me, whatever it is. I think that's really powerful. And then I've had a 16 career in the kind of healthcare software, healthcare finance space, which has been wonderful, and we help hospitals. But I don't really consider it all work. It's something I'm passionate about, all of them, and it's again, I credit being an athlete from an early age to any success that I have. I credit my wife big time too, because without her, none of it happens.
Yeah, retweet that for sure. That's my foundation. Huge. Just like without that done and settled at home, like none of this is possible.
Exactly right. I mean, she's at home with the kids right now, and you know, I'm across the country, and they fully support it. Right. The one quick story from them that I'll share from the World Marathon Challenge. It was actually after it happened. It was a St. Patrick's Day party. So, you know, a month later, And the dads are all standing around, and my daughter Harper, our older, she was 6 at the time, walked by, and they said, "Hey Harper, how cool, your dad just did the 7 marathon thing. Like, oh my gosh, like how exciting. Like, you must be so thrilled. What was your favorite part of it?" And she stops, and I had never asked this question, so I didn't know what she was going to say. I hadn't coached her up on it. So she turns and she, to these 5 grown men, she says, "The impact that it has on other people with type 1 and those kids." And we all kind of shook our heads like, holy crap, like that's quite an answer. And for me, it was like, I get goosebumps thinking about it, right? Because it's that next generation, and I know you work a lot with kids, but to see, I think, and I hope that the impact that, people like yourself and hopefully what I've been able to do has on the next wave of type 1s, or the next wave of just, the youngsters coming up, I think it will hopefully make for a brighter future. And as corny or cliche as that might be, that's a driving force for me too.
Yeah, but I think to know, like, to see, because you didn't coach her on that answer. She's perceptive enough to see the bigger picture, to understand like the sacrifice of you being away and you going through all that training was for something bigger than just you. It's not just the crossing the finish line at the end of it and the big welcome party. Certainly that's a part of it, but it also is just like that seed that it might plant in some kid somewhere with diabetes. Is okay, it expands your idea of what's possible.
Exactly. Can you imagine like some 8-year-old's diagnosed and they go and see, your basketball career or my marathon thing or, whatever, Lauren Cox in the WNBA, right? Like there's so many great examples. And so I think of like, okay, we didn't have those examples when we were diagnosed and we've come here, but what about some kid who's newly diagnosed and sees all the stories that they're going now? Like in 20 years from now, what are we going to be talking about? They're like, hey, remember that kid? Like they went on to...
I fully believe like there's going to be some type 1 astronaut or somebody who said, okay, like this has been done, but what if I could push it a little bit further? And, that's one of the big reasons why we kept the name Diabetics Doing Things. It started off as a working title, but when you're diagnosed, the first thing you look for is somebody with diabetes who does the thing that you love or the thing that you want to do. And so for people like you, for people like Lauren Cox, for people, Seb, who are these amazing achievers in spite of a life with diabetes, it gets me hyped, first of all. And, it's just this tight-knit community of like, oh yeah, I know not only did you accomplish this great thing that a very few people ever accomplish, but you also did it with diabetes. And that is, I don't know, nothing gets me more hyped than that. I could run through a wall. I'm ready to go. Let's talk a little bit like tactically. We live with diabetes. Here we are. We're at the diabetes conference. What's in your diabetes toolkit? Like how do you, on a day-to-day, like how are you managing your type 1?
Yeah, I love talking about diabetes stuff, and most people assume I work in the diabetes space. I don't, but because I talk about it so much. But I've worn a Dexcom CGM for, 13, maybe more than 12 years, less than 14 years, somewhere in there. And I love it, right? That guidance from a CGM is everything, and it's such a great learning tool, and it gives confidence and comfort. And so that's been a staple. I've used pens and pumps. You kind of used everything in between. Just the continuous advancement in that space is amazing.
It's kind of interesting, like being able to live in the time where, when I was diagnosed, I'm sure it was the same way with you. We were diagnosed very close years, only about a year apart. Like all the stuff they said was coming is already out.
Yeah.
It's like, it's here. We're hybrid closed loops. We got DIY loop. We've got Afrezza, different options that they said would be there when, 15, 20 years ago. And now here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. We're living it. And, we say, I've heard other people say, right, it's never been a better time to be diagnosed. Obviously you don't want to be diagnosed,
right.
but the now if we can, kind of improve access and get it to everybody who can benefit from it. That's another subject. And then I started using Afrezza, 7 years ago.
Okay, everyone, we're going to take a quick break and discuss some important safety information. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium, and is not for patients with chronic lung disease such as asthma or COPD, or for patients allergic to insulin. Tell your doctor if you ever smoked, have ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you are pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Okay, that's the rest of the important safety information, so let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, it was pretty early on. We lived in Los Angeles, so we're near the headquarters, so my endocrinologist had known about it for a while, and we started using it just for corrections because it starts working so fast. And as an athlete, she was curious about kind of, because it's out of your system so fast as well, I don't have to worry about that, 90-minute, 2-hour kind of tail from an injectable insulin if I'm going to be out exercising. So I can take a corrective dose if I need to before a training session or before a race, and roughly an hour later it's kind of out of my system. So we started using it as just corrections, and now, having seen the benefit and knowing how fast it can start to work, it's become also a mealtime in addition to corrections, and I love it. I feel like it's a secret weapon that I don't know why it's secret, but so I've been a big fan of it and continue to use it 7 years later.
I totally agree, and I think that's one of the reasons why I agreed to work with Mannkind on this, and it's why I'm here at this conference, because every time I encounter somebody in the diabetes community who uses it, they always have such positive things to say for all the reasons that you said, like fast acting, out of your system quicker, using it for corrections or mealtime. But what I also encounter is people who ask about it. Maybe their doctor has never heard of it, or their endo is not as comfortable prescribing it. And so for me to be able to be here as a patient and talk to HCPs and endos and CDCESs about the benefits and how it works as a part of my diabetes toolkit was really important to me, because like you said, access is a super important thing. And there's a lot of different elements that go into it: cost, understanding and prescribing it from your HCP, and working with your care team, and them having the confidence to be able to say, yeah, I think this is right for you.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's kind of been a no-brainer for me. And the only time I didn't use it is I just, in switching insurances, but that's, been able to get sorted out. But I've become I want to use whatever's the best thing out there, right? And if there's something that's better than what I'm currently using, then I want to use it. My time, my kind of overnights were an issue, and so I that's where you talk about the smart insulin pumps and that kind of automation during the night. I travel a lot for work, so if I'm on a plane, right, and kind of, as we were joking about, right, you can't do lunges up and down the aisle if you want.
Yeah, people look at you funny if you're doing like down and backs on the plane like more than one time. People start to get a little bit worried.
Exactly. So yeah, it's been a tool that is literally in my diabetes bag right there, and will continue to be.
So you're a guy, I think, that a lot of people, including myself, look to motivation or inspiration for all the reasons that we've talked about on this podcast. Like, where do you find your motivation? Like, training for 8 months, 10 months for the World Marathon Challenge is not an easy thing. There's a lot of repetition. You got to show up. That's the first part. Like, how do you find that motivation? Like, what gets you going? What powers you to kind of go for those great heights?
Yeah, I've always, I think, and check with my parents on this one, but I think I've been pretty self-motivated most of my life. Not to say that I haven't needed help, 1,000%, right? I mean, this past year alone has been just mentally, kind of from a mental health perspective, has been probably one of the most challenging. And that's where kind of your diabetes team. My diabetes team include my endocrinologist and CDs and dietitian, but also most importantly my wife, my 2 kids, immediate family, right? Kind of that support group is instrumental for me in getting through just the day-to-day stuff, whether it's type 1 or work or life or whatever it might be. And they're all equally inspiring to me. I mean, obviously my girls are everything and my biggest points of inspiration. My wife, I mean, she works harder than pretty much anybody I know, and she's been in the nonprofit space for her whole career, just changing so many lives in ways that just amazes me every day. When I brought the World Marathon Challenge thing to her, she probably in her head batted an eye, but to me didn't skip a beat and knew the importance of it for me. Not for me to have these medals on the wall, because they're not even on the wall, they're in the closet in a bag, tucked in the corner, but for the diabetes community, right? I mean, I've said it before, that's why I did it.
Yeah.
And so the motivation, did I want to get up at 3 a.m. and start my run at 4 so I was done before the girls woke up and could help, still be a dad and be present and do, Saturday morning chocolate chip pancakes? Not always, but there's lots of pieces of motivation that kind of came together, right? I mean, there's individuals out there. My uncle has been a huge role model and influence. I could list 20, but I'm really lucky also to have those pieces of motivation, because I think we live in a major city and they're, surrounded by people and lots of great examples, but, people out there in rural communities or that don't have access to the same stuff we do, and maybe they don't have a source of inspiration. So, hopefully, I'll keep doing it until they kick me off the stage and then I'll stop, or if let someone else take the reins. But I think that there's so many great points of motivation out there, and I'm continuously kind of inspired too by go to these talks and you get the 6-year-old who stands up and asks a question, and like what they go through, like that to me is as inspiring as anything else, as a professional athlete or musician or whatever it is. But I met a gentleman in his late 80s who's had it for 50 years, and I wouldn't have known if he hadn't told me, because he looks as healthy as it can be. And that to me is incredibly inspiring, and to see, knowing what he's been through the last, call it 50 years without the access to stuff we have. I mean, come on, that's amazing.
I agree. I mean, I think, it's been a while since I've been at a community event because of the pandemic, but, as those start to come back, meeting those people who have lived with diabetes for 50 plus, like I met a guy one time at a JDRF event in his 90s, and like you said, looked totally normal, and was just like, they're so excited to meet and see younger people with diabetes, to hear stories, because, I've been thinking about this a lot more recently, is if you or I were born at almost any other time in history, we'd be dead. Yeah. Because there wasn't the technology and the science to know how to manage this condition. And so we're really on borrowed time. And what we get to do with that time to inspire others, to connect with others, people like these guys that we met who have lived with it for so long and are living well and have done everything that they ever wanted to do. On day one, they were told probably they wouldn't live past 20 or 30. Yeah. And to see them hit those marks and exceed, and not even just achieve, but just get to experience life and get to have a family, or get to have a career, or get to just wake up to another sunrise, like that is super, super, empowering for me. And I want to spread that message for other people too, because I know that there are low moments, like literally and figuratively, where you just don't feel like pushing that rock back up the hill, kind of like Sisyphus, it's like, it's going to come back down. But I want to ask you something, because you mentioned it earlier, and, Eric Tozer struggles with mental health, like mental burden. Like, talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you, I think it's so important for people like yourself to normalize what, somebody who maybe isn't wanting to run the World Marathon Challenge, or who isn't as motivated to do that, like to be normal and to say, oh yeah, like this guy also feels that mental strain of life and of diabetes.
Yeah. I haven't talked about this a lot and kind of struggled with it, but one of my best childhood friends took his own life. We were walking out the door for New Year's Eve to go to our best friend's house, and I got a phone call, and our other good friend had let me know, and it was, it was 4 of us from preschool through elementary school, and we were on basketball, soccer, t-ball, you name it, we did it together, right? And he's a giant of a man. He played football at Stanford, right? He's tight end, and just it was pretty amazing to see how somebody who was the star, and he was the big man on campus in high school, and I played soccer, and I was a kicker for the football team, and so just another opportunity for us to grow even closer. But he was the star, but he always made everybody else around him feel like the star, and that's something I'll never forget, and that's something that I think will carry with me forever. But that was tough, and I've never been so lucky. I haven't had much loss in my life, grandparents, but I was too young to really kind of appreciate it or understand it. And we've all lost so much this last 2 years, right? I mean, gosh, just to have family still with us is kind of a miracle in its own right. But so that's kind of how the year started, and I kind of didn't handle it, didn't manage it, didn't really know how to manage it, what to do, what not to do. And
grief is tough, man.
Yeah, it was real, and it ended up kind of having a bit of a, I don't know, some sort of a panic anxiety attack. And it was really scary to be totally frank. And I mean, again, without my wife, I probably wouldn't be here today. So that was just another reason that the kind of she's everything. But and then you just all the other stuff added on top of that, right? I don't want to take too much time on it. But,
no, I'm first of all, thank you for sharing it. I know it's difficult, and I think that's why it's important to have that vulnerability, especially as they don't teach you in Apex Big Man on Campus Alpha Male School to be able to open up and have these types of discussions. But I think it's so real and humanizing to say, above all, you're Eric Tozer, person, human, and you're going to encounter these difficult things. And it's still important to go back to that stuff, like celebrating the small wins, relying on friends and family, opening up and sharing, because I know there's someone listening to this podcast who will have experienced something similar, maybe not the same type of loss, but is struggling to find their own way. And so to hear, somebody like yourself, who we follow and get inspired by on a daily basis, it just makes you seem more human. And I don't know, I just appreciate, I'm grateful that you were able to share that. And I know it's difficult too, like having, up until a few years ago, I had not experienced great loss in my life as well. I was very fortunate. And then, I lost my dad, and to be able to open up and talk about that has been very difficult. Yeah. And, shout out my therapist, shout out Michelle for, working together for the last 3 years and really helping me, a foundation for myself, and my wife, who has been so supportive in and out of, all of my kind of ups and downs. I kind of have a poet's heart. I'm like way big highs and low lows, and I just kind of like find a little balance in the middle. Yeah. So yeah, thank you, man, for sharing that. And rest in peace to your friend, and, thoughts go out to his family. But man, it's so important to normalize that and say, hey, we are humans. This is a long life. This is a marathon of life with diabetes. And there's going to be things that have nothing to do with diabetes that can set us off, down negative paths. And it's important to, rely on our support system and rely on each other. So thank you, man, for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a journey, right? And that's the beautiful part of it, right? I think that's kind of the life is it's a gift. And I think that's another kind of just motivating factor, right? And I don't know why I'm 38 and, plenty of life ahead, but I still, I don't know why, just have this, like, I don't want to leave anything on the table. I don't want to not do it to the fullest. Like, why not? Like, what's the alternative? Right? I mean, you can, and that's kind of the beauty of it too, is we can decide. It's up to us. Like, nobody can decide if I'm going to do something within reason, right? It's up to me. I get to decide if I want to do the World Marathon Challenge. I get to decide if I want to do, the best job I can at work or the worst job I can, or I get to decide how to react when our 6-year-old has a little meltdown, right? and so that power of, like, we're responsible for our own greatness that's pretty amazing, because on the flip side, you can decide if you want to sit on the couch all day and play video games. Cool, sure. Great. Or sorry, I shouldn't say that. That's not fair, because I love video games. If we want to be kind of the best version that we can be. And what does that mean? It might not mean running 7 marathons. Great. I hope not, right? Because there's people out there doing way cooler things in science and technology and medicine and music and arts. And I'm in awe by all of that. Like, I had the chance to meet Eric Pasley, who's a fellow Type 1 and an amazing country musician. I'm just in awe of people that can have that creative ability to write music. And he's a tremendous music writer. And I love that. Watching other people be great at things I'll just sit in, whether it's sports or music or art or whatever. I appreciate all of that, and I love it.
Man, I do too. I think, for me, we lost an icon of greatness, Kobe Bryant, recently, and what I mourn is we missed his later in life wisdom, and we also, the great Bill Russell just passed away, and we got this great second career of his to inspire and to kind of be a shepherd of sport and of competition. And, what I remember about Kobe is how he would talk about, we have a chance every day to wake up and be great. And that's really up to us. Yeah. And it is really whatever greatness means to you. I love that, what you're talking about is you have these rare chances to do something. And I also have not shared this publicly much, but, with an athlete like yourself, I'll share it. When I got done with my college basketball career, I, had a really honest conversation with myself, with my dad, and with, some of my teammates. And I was like, look, basketball is not the greatest thing. It's not the thing I was put on this earth to do best. I was pretty okay, but I have a chance to try to go do something big. And if I don't do it now, I will not have a chance to do it later. Like I could see the clock ticking. And I was like, so I owe it to myself to find out how far we can. And I feel like I'll be able to get a job at a desk and do that really well for a long time. But getting a job on the court between those lines is, the clock's ticking. And I was fortunate enough to do it. And, that's one of the reasons why I'm here today. Like that, those decisions can put you on a path that you don't even realize.
That's right.
And they'll lead you to places that have nothing to do with the World Marathon Challenge, have nothing to do with playing against the Harlem Globetrotters, but they can open up ideas of where your life could lead.
Yeah.
And I I felt like sharing that. I mean, that's you never know, somebody out there listening to this. Shout out to Mannkind for sponsoring it, for bringing us together. Yeah. Who knows what they're capable of? It could be, art, it could be science, it could be just a personal relationship that, they decided that, I'm going to change something about myself today. I'm going to be the best version of myself that I can be. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And like, I feel like it sounds corny, right? Be the best version of yourself. But like, it's cliche for a reason. I feel like, cause it's true. Like, right. And when we talk about Kobe, and gosh, what a human being, and just competitor. I mean, the list goes on, right? But I think, to your point, I loved that glimpse that we got to see post career.
The guy won an Oscar in like 2 years.
Come on, just get out of here. And right, like we have 2 young girls, so the girl dad thing, like for me, hit hard. And I remember, I think we probably all remember where we were when he passed away, and just that terrible tragedy. And I remember like trying to talk to our girls about it, and they're young, so kind of doing it in a way that makes sense, but also it was hard. It was just as a young dad, and a girl dad, like but I wear that with pride, and I think I've always been proud of being a dad. I've always wanted to be a dad, and couldn't be happier, being a dad. But I love that Kobe kind of shined a spotlight on, here's this arguably one of the greatest ever to play the game of basketball. And I never got to meet him, but it seems like he was most excited about his girls and the future for them, and building a future not just for them but for all young women wanting to play sports or chase whatever their dreams are. And I love that. And I actually just had a suit made for a wedding, and the inside liner, there was 25,000 options or whatever, and one of them was a black snake kind of print. And I immediately went to Kobe because like the Black Mamba, and so that's now inside my suit.
Sweet.
And it's a super, it's kind of silly, right? But that mentality, I think, is something that I've grasped onto, because if someone's going to be the best ever, like or one of the best ever, like I'm going to get whatever I can, learn whatever I can, pick up whatever I can from him or her. But yeah, gosh, what a life.
So I've been working on this question. I've been trying to get better at asking questions. We've been doing this podcast for 7 years. So I thought of this one, so I'm workshopping it, but I'm really interested to hear your response. Okay. So imagine you could go back in time and write your younger self a message on like a bathroom mirror. So like when, sometimes I don't know, everybody's bathroom's different. So I don't know, the shower steams up and you could maybe see a message on the mirror. What message would you write to your younger self?
My gosh, great question. And you've been doing a great job on the podcast, so give yourself more credit.
Thank you. I'm trying. There's a lot of competition out there now. A lot of podcasters, a lot of people on there asking questions.
There's some great podcasts, but you're doing an amazing job and doing such a great service for our community. And I say our because it's our, it's such a group thing. But I feel like I've done have I made mistakes? 1,000%. Way too many mistakes. But those are what I've learned from and have gotten me here today. And I'm lucky, I feel like, to be able to say like life is pretty great. I feel like if I don't, I'm a white male in America, a straight white male in America. So I really can't complain about life.
Yeah.
Right. But I think I've always had a service mindset, but I don't know that and I did like Big Brother, Big Sister when I was, younger. And so I feel like it's been there, but I think that in serving others and helping, I think greatness can come through that. And I think I can obviously only speak for myself, but I've become a better person because of it. And in teaching somebody maybe something else, you kind of learn yourself. And so I would tell my younger self to not shy away from that. I grew up in a modest household and had kind of every intention of continuing soccer and going to play professionally, and had a job offer, and kind of, at the time it made, it was the right call, and financially it was the right call, and it was an entry-level job. So don't, still working very hard, but it was very much kind of about just trying to be secure financially. And that's important, for everybody in their own kind of realm and in their own way. But I wish I had jumped at that chance, like that window you talked about, right? I do somewhat regret. I don't regret it because I have the most amazing family and I'm so fortunate. But there's that unknown, right? Of like,
Right.
you know, could I have kept playing, and what would that experience? I think to be a professional athlete would be, you know, so much fun, and to be able to do whatever it is that you love as your career would be an amazing opportunity. Not that I don't love selling financial improvement software to hospitals, but yeah, I think I would just encourage myself to be a little bit more confident in myself. I've struggled with I was the shyest kid, afraid to kind of prop myself up, even in times where I maybe should have. Fear of being, you know, kind of looking condescending, you know, like I'm full of myself or whatnot. But more of it is being, you know, take pride in what you accomplish, because there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing bad about being proud. I tell it to my girls, right? Like, you know, you nailed a piano recital, or did well at ballet, or did a great job at school, whatever it is, like celebrate those. And I didn't learn that until later, and I think that's something that kind of fuel that could have helped earlier on.
Well, I'm telling you, man, I have seen you presenting to auditoriums of hundreds of people. I know you inspire thousands of people across the world. So, you know, maybe you were shy before, but that led you to, I mean, inspiring tons of people and like get outside your comfort zone. You give yourself some credit too, man. You've done amazing things, and will continue to do them.
Thank you. I really sincerely appreciate that, because I'm certainly my harshest, which I don't mind, because, you know, I think it's trying to have a healthy balance of it. But yeah.
Well, Eric, man, thank you for taking the time for this podcast, and thank you for all that you do for people with diabetes in the public light and behind the scenes. You know, we're talking about your coaching and inspiration for the next generation. I certainly appreciate it, and I know many, many other people do too. So thank you, man.
Well, yeah, I'm right back at you, man. It's been a fun kind of parallel journeys to watch you and so many others continue to, you know, kind of bring our community up as a whole. So I'm excited to see where, you know, what this next generation brings and where things go from here.
Me as well, man. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.